Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Trading Fame in a Virtual Space, a legal guide for social media influencers and others. This webinar is part of Law Awareness Weeks at CDC 2021, a collaboration between Law Society Pro Bono Services, the 5 community development councils, National University of Singapore Faculty of Law, Singapore University of Social Sciences School of Law, Singapore Management University School of Law, and the Singapore Corporate Counsel Association Pro Bono Chapter, supported by People's Association. I am Ragana, your moderator for today. So first, some housekeeping matters. Please feel free to ask any questions at any time during this webinar using the Q&A function found on the Zoom bar at the bottom. We will do our best to address your questions during or at the end of the webinar. There will be a QR code featured in the slides for you to scan to access the handouts made available for this webinar. I highly recommend you to scan the QR code and download the handouts. The link will also be sent to you in a follow-up email tomorrow. Please note the discussion today or any material provided in this webinar is not intended to substitute or constitute as professional legal advice. You should always consult a lawyer if you require specific advice. Today, I have 2 amazing speakers. We have Paylin and Wei Li. So Paylin, could you get your camera on? Thanks, Paylin. Nice seeing both of you today. It's been a while. So let me introduce to everyone Paylin. Now, Paylin is a pioneer in introducing litigation PR to Singapore. And her forte includes providing strategic PR consultancy in public affairs and public education campaigns, communication, corporate litigation, and crisis communication and government relations. Now, she regularly volunteers at various community and non-profit organizations such as LSPBS, and she's a district councillor with Southwest CDC. Thank you very much for being here today, Paylin.
Thank you.
And speaking about legal advice, we have an awesome lawyer today. Now, Wei Li is experienced in commercial and civil litigation, including arbitration and mediation. He is also a familiar face and volunteers at LSPBS as law awareness speaker. Thank you very much for being here, Wei Li.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you guys.
Now, to know more about Paylin, Wei Li, and myself, as you can see on your screen, you can scan the QR code that links to their LinkedIn profiles. Okay, so once again, thank you very much for everyone for being here and our 2 speakers. So let's start. The rise of the internet, okay, has led to the rise of social media influencers, altering aspirations of many around the world. I've tried, okay? So in the survey done in 2019 by Totally Awesome, a leading kid-safe digital media company, it found 90% of children between the ages of 4 and 12 use social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, of course now it's TikTok, YouTube. Many young Singaporeans are following social media influencers and aspiring to be one. The industry is certainly not a bed of roses, as we recently see in the press. And today we're going to chat about the good, the bad, and the ugly of being a social media influencer, and how far would one go to become a social media influencer. So to set the scene, let's start with a broad landscape of the social media social media industry and what it takes to become one. So I'm going to throw my first question to Paylin. Okay, I have an Instagram account. Crazy, I know, but I love Instagram because it allows me to take a lot of nice pictures, right, with filters. With a dismal 470 followers, but with over 17,000 photos of food, fashion, travels. So does that make me a social media influencer?
Well, technically, you are influencing the 400 over people who are following you to some extent. But I think from an industry point of view, typically when we look at, working with social media influencers, in the context of Singapore, we have to remember that we are a market of about 5 million people, compared to if you're in a country where there are 120 million people, then obviously the number of followers would change. But locally in Singapore, I think typically corporate brands and organizations who are prepared to officially partner influencers, they are looking at numbers of followers above about 10,000, okay? And anything, I would say anything above 50,000 would be a very significant following already in Singapore. But of course, the more the merrier. And with tools and technology today, we are able to audit, if these followers are real followers, or are they likely to, for example, be logging in from a foreign land and doing it mass, There is another market that sometimes at least in the last 3 years, we started seeing some brands and organizations preferring, and we call them the micro influencers. And generally, they are those with more than 2,000 followers. They will qualify as a micro influencer. So if you work with, say, 5 micro influencers, it's as good as working with an influencer with 10,000 followers and above.
Okay, so but since we're talking about the different types of social influencers and what they are, you've jumped into it, which is great. So would I be safe to say the mega are 50,000 and above?
There really isn't a benchmark that way, okay? It really depends. But I would say anything from definitely 100,000 and above in Singapore is already considered very significant. Yeah.
Okay, so how about small ones like me, Nano? How are we social media influencers?
You are, because whatever you are posting is influencing the 400 over people who's following you. So I would say anyone with a social media account, whether on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and in some other countries, they have platforms like WeChat, etc. You are influencing people. I mean, we even have this area we call dark social media. Dark social media is simply WhatsApp, for example, Telegram, for example. Now, in my family group chat, for example, people are influencers. I have 50 over people in my family group chat, and when they post and tell you to eat ginger in the morning, you better eat ginger in the morning, it's going to make you healthy. And that's influencing you.
Okay, fair enough. How about you, Whaley? Have you been influencing anyone in your group chats?
No, nobody likes to hear from lawyers in group. And I am definitely not an influencer because my content is very boring. Yeah.
Okay, not yet. So actually, then my next question to Peilin is, does it pay to become a social media influencer?
That's a very difficult question to answer because it really depends what one sees as pay, right? It is equivalent to asking, say 20 years ago, people are asking the question, should I be a celebrity? Should I join Star Search or a Talent Time and be famous? What is enough to trade my privacy for? So obviously, if you are a public account means, so for example, if you have an account on Facebook or Instagram, you can choose where people can follow you without your approval. That's a public account, right? But you can opt to lock your account such that you only approve followers as people that you trust or you know. Now, so in order to be public, right, you can very well expect that you are trading privacy. And what is worth your privacy? I cannot answer that for anyone else. Sometimes, and we do know that there are people who earn a very decent living being an influencer. They are able to charge fees for promoting products or services. They'll do videos in return for money. Sometimes people do it because it gives them publicity, and as a result, they get more clients or customers. Say, for example, they are a property agent, but because they are dishing out interesting nuggets of information on their social media accounts, right? And as a result, they become influencing that way. And clients want them to market their property. So you get more clients from there, and that may be good payment for you. And sometimes some people just want goods in exchange, so they don't need fees, but they're quite happy to be invited to exclusive events, because that's what some influencers are after, right? And then there are people who simply love fame for the sake of fame, and they don't care even if there's no money. You know, as long as they are famous, people know them, they want that, they crave that. And so I would say it really depends on each individual, what they're looking for in life, and what then will qualify for, does it pay to be an influencer.
So it's a bit difficult to put a price to fame. It really depends on one's want.
Yes.
Okay,
indeed.
very interesting. So let's say with my dismal 470 followers, what kind of skills should one have before embarking on this journey? Because I'm sure there are some young participants in here who are aspiring, as we all heard just now. What kind of skills do they need?
Well, my first question to you is your account public or private?
Mine is private, but let's say for today it's public.
Okay, so if your question is, my account is public and I would like to get more followers, what do I need to do? Again, I cannot tell you the answer, you know, because there's so many things you can do. Number one, you can break the law, be famous, and as a result, tomorrow there'll be a lot of people following you. You can go out and make fun of a very famous politician, and you will be famous. There may be more people following you, but you will also be faced with a defamation suit. So there are different ways to be more successful as an influencer. But I guess if you want to do it in a non, criminal way, or in a more legal way, then you can look at what it is that you have a love for. So if you love food, for example, or you love cooking, you know, and I happen to have heard rumors of you being a great chef, then maybe you can share recipes, you can share your cooking videos, and it will attract like-minded people, definitely.
Okay. So are there any guiding rules or regulations that social media influencers have to abide by like standard industry requirements, if there's such a thing?
I have to point to Wei Li, because
okay, so Wei Li, the question has been thrown to you.
I don't think there is to the best of my knowledge, there isn't a social media act, right? Or a social media legislation. Very much depends on, like Paylin said earlier, what your area of specialty or area of focus is, right? I suppose on a general level, if you are doing paid work as an influencer, meaning if you receive endorsements, or if you review products that are given to you, let's say by a sponsor, there is an obligation under the guidelines promulgated by the Advertising Standards Authority of Singapore for you to disclose these kind of, so to speak, sponsorships, right? So I think the intention behind that is that we don't want influencers to be misleading the public by saying, look, this product is great or this restaurant is great, and withholding at the same time from the public the fact that they have been actually paid or they've been sponsored to say such things, right? So I think that's the baseline. Apart from that, I don't see one particular rule or one particular law that sort of governs what influencers do. Of course, there are many other laws that govern human beings like you and I, regardless of whether or not we are influencers in our day-to-day activities, right? So I can think of some examples. So recently I have read about an influencer who got into trouble doing a backflip in the zoo.
Oh, yes.
Into what, a rhinoceros enclosure, or was it a hippo enclosure?
I
Can't
think it was
remember. Right?
yeah.
Anyway, it was an enclosure that he wasn't supposed to enter, let alone backflip into. Okay, so that's obvious trespassing, for example, right? And I think Palin mentioned some good points earlier. Some influencers make a living or attract attention out of, being opinionated, giving commentaries. How far do you go, right? When you say things about certain things, certain people, are there certain limits that you can't cross? What if you say something nasty about somebody that isn't true? Worst of all, what if you say something that, offends the sensitivities and feelings of a particular religion, a particular race, a particular class of people? So yeah, I don't think there's a straightforward answer to your question, Meghana, unfortunately.
Which is fine. It's fine.
I would say we should be guided by our sensibilities, lah. Although I do know that common sense. That's common nowadays.
Common sense is not common anymore.
Yeah, right.
But before we jump into, and you've opened up a gateway for me to ask you a lot of questions about legal, I just want to go back to Palin and just very quickly to ask Palin, what is your view of the industry in Singapore for social media influencers? If you could just put it in one sentence and to sort of give us an overview of what you think the industry is like.
I can do it in one sentence. I can't do most things in one sentence. But I would like to remind everyone, because if I recall myself, like the journey that I've taken as a professional, when I joined the industry 20 years ago, I was doing decks about blogs to my clients. I was telling, we were researching and trying to decipher how best to work with a breed of people called bloggers, and that was not just with clients who were like involved in selling products. I know, come to my restaurant, there were bloggers around. They were called food bloggers. There were bloggers that were sharing shopping tips. And there were bloggers who had very strong opinions about maybe policies. And I remember there were bloggers who, lawyers who were blogging about their cases, and judges had to make a decision what to do with these platforms, right? So as a country, and I think it's probably global and not just as a country, we have evolved since blogging days. Shortly after blogging became very popular, we saw companies come forward to be managers of bloggers. And one of the bigger ones were, this group of people called NAFNANG, and I worked with them. They had at one time 30,000 over bloggers under their umbrella of managing them. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge number.
Yes.
Then we started, the bloggers moved onto other platforms. They were not just, bloggers, right? They became people with accounts on Facebook, on Instagram, but the difference, not so much, from blogging. The only difference is that blogging was more long form, and Facebook, Instagram is a lot more short form. And blogging, probably they require more time because it's long form, whereas anything on Facebook, Instagram is very, very immediate, very instantaneous. And then the word changed from bloggers to influencers. But that's really just, if you ask me, a matter of form, not substance, right? Substantially, this industry is almost 20 years old as far as I'm concerned. And we have seen it evolve. And today we are seeing not just companies focused on managing influencers. We're seeing the typical traditional celebrity agencies like your MediaCorp, one of the biggest celebrity agency, Fly Entertainment, etc. They are managing influencers too, because that's where the industry starts to merge. Celebrities themselves are influencers. They have, many of them open their own Facebook account, Instagram account, and they use it as a platform to reach out to their fans and people who know them. So I would say the industry is evolving, continues to evolve. Where we are today, we are starting to be a lot clearer about boundaries. For example, they have passed certain rules and regulations, whether in Parliament or otherwise. The platforms themselves have also evolved to try and stamp out fake news, etc. And I think it's great that we are living during this time as we continue to be witness to the evolution of this industry.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But there's one point I want to pick up. Actually, I thought was really interesting that big companies, before we go off to you, Whaley, big companies like MediaCorp and Fly Entertainment are managing these social influencers. So just putting out a question, do you think it makes sense for a young and upcoming social influencer to be managed, or can they just go free agent?
Wait, let me explain what I mean when I say they manage, okay?
Okay.
So in the past, you need to first join Star Search, you go and act in a show, and then you become famous, and then you open a Facebook account. But we saw a reverse of that.
Oh, okay.
We saw a reverse of that. So I mean, from the top of my head, Tosh, for example, Tosh was a YouTuber, so bloggers, YouTuber, right? And he was YouTubing when, and then a director, you know, the director of Our Boys to Men, spotted him on YouTube and said, call him, and invited him to become an actor in the movie. So it's kind of a reverse situation. No, so if you look at MediaCorp or Fly Entertainment, they continue to do their core business of managing celebrities. But what I mean is that, where would you place Tosh today? Today, Tosh is acting, he is singing, you know, I mean, he's done his released songs. He continues to do work on YouTube, and he has a huge following on Instagram. So
yes,
is he a celebrity or is he a social media influencer? I think it's challenging and difficult to draw very clear lines and box them up. They are often more than one. And that's what I'm trying to say about like the way social media influencers have evolved. They are no longer just social media influencers. The other person I can remember recently is probably Annette. Is that her name? Annette, right? So she was more social media influencer, and then she started singing. And then she started singing with Ben King. She did that Chai Peng store music video, and I think she was performing, if I'm not wrong, for one of the government projects, and she's just become more celebrity than just social media influencer. So I think it's amazing how it continues to evolve, and we should just keep our eyes peeled, like watch this space.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's amazing, and how they are so spotlighted is quite scary. So talking about spotlights, and you know, social media influencers spend hours creating content, doing various other activities. Like you said, you know, endorsing, reviewing, or advertising a brand, makeup, curry in a bun. I've seen, you know, it's interesting. But believe it or not, they really neglect the legal concerns, which can sometimes result in either misleading advertising because they don't know, potential liability, lawsuits for infringement because, you know, PDPA, you know, or censorship. And sometimes even break as simple as not reading their contracts and breaking them with a specific brand. So, of course, we have Whaley today, our lawyer. So, Whaley, based on what Palin has shared, I'm going to ask you some legal considerations for our lawyers. So what you can see now on the screen, let's talk about copyright, because some of these social media influencers actually do their own material, right? Like they sing, they might write their own lyrics. So very quickly, could you share a little bit about copyright infringement and what should a social media influencer take note of?
Copyright is it's a really vast topic. So well, where do I start? Well, I think I should start by saying that the copyright laws in Singapore are expected to undergo a very major revamp sometime in November this year, right? The laws have been dormant and stagnant for, I would say, maybe the past 10 years already. So Parliament is changing copyright laws because the government does realize that we need a set of more updated laws to deal with the changing media landscape, right? We're moving from linear programming, we're moving from traditional media to the internet, to new media. So I think one thing that influencers might want to take note of when producing content is to be careful not to infringe on the copyright of other people, right? I think that's the first and foremost concern. In the age of the internet, it's very easy to borrow content. We repost content all the time, right? Without knowing it sometimes. We see something that's interesting, something that we like, we just click repost, we click share. But I mean, if you are a casual internet user, then I suppose that's fine. Nobody's really going to come after you, right? But if, assuming you've made it big as an influencer, you are nano, you are macro, you are, not nano, sorry, you're mega, you are macro, right? You have a huge following and people assume that whatever content you post is going to be monetized, going to be commercialized. If you, let's say, rip a song of an artist and then you put it in your video without getting permission, or you take a video clip made by somebody else and then you kind of share it, and then as part of one of your ad campaigns and you don't ask for permission, you may get into trouble because the originators of these content are going to come after you and say, hey, how come you use my OG content to make money, right? I'm not getting anything, you know, you're benefiting off me in some sense. So that's one area that I think we lawyers see quite a number of misunderstanding or disputes in relation to copyrighted material and content. Yeah, so be careful. If you want to use content that's not yours, be it a song, a video, a picture, for example, of course, the most surefire way to protect yourself is to get permission, right, from whoever created the content. But we do realize that sometimes it's difficult because if you go online and you, let's say, you find a picture of a setting sun, for example, it's not possible always to find out, you know, who took that photo, right? So the next best thing that I think you can do is to credit right, the source of the photo. Yeah. So either ask for permission or credit.
Okay, that's good advice. Always ask for permission or give credit. So advice on contracts with brands and sponsors besides read your contract.
You know what, Regana, it's an interesting point you raised because that's assuming you have a contract, you know. I know so many of these so-called influencers or bloggers or what have you not, who go into these endorsement deals with brand sponsors and don't have a contract. So it's not clear what the respective obligations are, right? If I'm the influencer, how do I know how many posts I need to make for you? And assuming I know, okay, I need to create like 5 pieces of content. What kind of content? Is it transient content like an Instagram story that disappears within 24 hours, a TikTok video that disappears also, or is it permanent content that's latched onto my Instagram page, for example, a permanent post? Even if it's a story, do I have to pin it? How long do I have to pin it for? So a lot of these endorsements, these deals, they are just concluded and decided verbally, you see, with nothing reduced into writing. Of course, I'm not suggesting that for every endorsement that you do as an influencer, you need to have a black and white contract signed by both parties, drafted by lawyers. No, not necessary. But it would help most of the time to actually maybe just record what's agreed between parties into writing law. It could be a simple email. It could even be a WhatsApp message or a Telegram message, right? So at least you have a record of who needs to do what and who needs to pay who by when. Right? So I think in terms of contract, got to be very clear about what the respective duties and obligations are. What kind of post or what kind of content you want from me? How many pieces of content you want me to produce, right? And in return, how are you going to pay me? Are you going to pay me money? If so, by when must you pay me? Do you pay me an upfront payment and then the rest after I publish the content? Or are you going to pay me in tranches, in milestones? If so, when? Right? Or are you going to pay me in products, for example? Are you going to say, okay, you produce 5 videos for me, 2 on TikTok and 3 on Instagram, and then I give you 1 year supply of cosmetics? So I think these are very basic things that need to be recorded down somewhere at the very least, right? Don't leave it to... Yeah, I mean, a lot of people go into these kind of relationship, business dealings thinking, I trust you, you trust me, but I mean, as a lawyer, I'll tell you, trust is worth nothing. Because if trust is worth everything, then we lawyers, we don't need to
No work.
our job. Yeah, see you guys, bye. Right. So at least put it down somewhere in record line, I think. Yeah. So I think that's as much as I'll say about contracts.
Okay, so on that, I saw Paylin shaking her head about no contract. So Paylin, anything to weigh on about this part of not having? I'm surprised actually they're signed up with big brands and stuff. They have no contracts.
I mean, like I said, if they are represented by management company, the likelihood of them getting a contract is almost 100%. I mean, these companies, they know what they're doing, and a lot of the bigger influencers, they have already found someone to represent them, and they found it to be useful. The reason for that really is that it's a lot more easier to have someone negotiating the terms for you than doing it yourself, right? Because you want to start a relationship with a sponsor on a very positive note, and you don't want the last thing they remember is you bargaining with them about how much you're going to be paid, or whether how long the rights of that video they're going to have. So I think for me, at least, when we work with influencers, a lot of times we do it for our clients, and even if they do not want a contract, we will shove it down their mouth, because we really need to make sure that it's not so much that the influencers are protected, but that also at the client side, their rights are being protected as well.
Yeah.
So it is really better for both parties, not just better for the influencers, that they have proper documentation of the discussions, of the negotiations, and the final agreement that they're going to come, together with.
Okay, that's great. So next thing, Wei Li, I wanted to ask you just very quickly about, there's a lot of things happening online right now, work from home, keyboard warriors, all this kind of thing. So online harassment, cyber bullying, doxing, let's put that under one group. What are your thoughts and advice for social media influencers here?
Again, Regana, you always ask me the questions that
I know he sighs.
10 days to answer. Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack, right, in that question. And you are right, there are so many potential minefields lying around. You couple that with the fact that whether or not you agree or not, or whether or not you like it, people nowadays are becoming more and more easily offended. Somebody is going to take offense at something you say, right? There's always going to be a for you camp and against you camp. So how do you manage it, especially if you are a personality or an influencer who gains traction through expressing your views? No silver bullet solution to it. I think at the end of the day, there are certain very, very clear boundaries that you may not want to cross. First would be content that is regarded as seditious. Now, sedition isn't really a concept now because they have just sort of repealed the Sedition Act, right? And they are replacing it with a piece of new legislation that fosters, racial harmony, so to speak. So I would advise you, if you are an influencer, to maybe not go anywhere near discussing things like religion, race. There have been people sent to jail previously before for talking about racially sensitive things. I can recall off the top of my head this Filipino nurse, right, who apparently published something on his Facebook saying something nasty about Singaporeans. He was sent to jail, right? So I think race, religion, stay away from that. Now, the other thing that's of concern in today's day and age would be doxing. If you don't know what doxing is, doxing refers to an act of taking somebody's personal information, such as their name, their address, their where they work, the names of the children, their telephone number, and then publishing it online with an intention to name and shame the person. And I tell you, unless you're living under a rock, you will be able to at least bring to mind one instance of doxing, right? The one that I recall, not very recent, but nonetheless sensational. You remember the petrol station incident where some guy drove a BMW into petrol kiosk, and there was some dispute between him and the petrol kiosk attendant as to whether or not he wanted full tank or $10. So apparently, according to him, he wanted $10 worth of fuel, but the old man, who was the petrol attendant, heard he wanted full tank, right? He didn't want to pay for it. There was some sort of altercation, and the entire internet descended upon the BMW driver, right? Accusing him of bullying. I'm not saying he's right. Okay, I'm not taking sides, but that is a perfect example of how somebody can be doxxed, right? So I think when this happened, doxing still wasn't criminalized. Doxing became a proper criminal offense, I would say maybe about a year ago when they amended the Harassment Act, right? So don't dox people, right? Don't go and take somebody's name, address, mother's, father's, photo, children's information, and then put it on the internet and say, hey, go and name this person, go and shame this person, go and, order 100 pizzas using his address and deliver it to his house. Don't do that, because that's clear-cut doxing. And sometimes we feel like we are right to do these things because we think that, hey, whoever is being doxed deserves it, right? But I think the law draws a very clear line between what's legally permissible and what's not. So even if you think that a certain person has done something that's morally wrong, right? For example, the law won't pardon you for a doxing offense, if this person takes you to court for doxing. Another example that I can think of relates to instances where some victims of certain crimes, for example, right, they go onto their socials and they allege that a certain wrongdoing has been committed against them by, let's say, person X. And then they say, wow, this person X is a terrible person. He brought me into this room, he robbed me, she threatened me. Here's this person's photo. He studies at NUS, right? He's a year 2 engineering student. He's a rotten nut, okay? And then this person takes you to court and say, hey, well, you doxed me. I don't think it's a defense at the end of the day for you to tell the judge, Your Honor, I doxed him because he did something nasty to me. It's not going to be a defense, right? Just because somebody allegedly did something nasty doesn't mean that you have a right to splash his or her personal information all over the internet. So I think that's another minefield that I would try to avoid. Yeah.
Okay. So would defamation and making false statements be part of doxing?
Not quite. Defamation in and of itself is a very complicated creature. Defamation refers to a situation where you say something about a person, third parties read that something, and then as a result, they think of that person in a lower light, right? Their impression of that person suffers, the reputation of that person or that company or that brand suffers. That's reputation. And defamation can have severe consequences. So if you read the papers or if you just Google defamation in Singapore, you will see that if you happen to say something about somebody who's important, you could be slapped with a compensation order of amounting up to 200,000. So it's no joke, okay? What was the other thing you were saying?
False statements.
False statements is something, again, that's actionable now with the amendment of the Harassment Act. So in the past, if you said something false about my brand, my company, my product, or me personally, I need to sue you in defamation. But with the, yes.
Okay, so let's say, right, I know you make kueh lah. So let's say I say your kueh. Right? They are false statements. So you can sue me, but how would that stick? Are we in a suing culture?
This is tricky. You say the kueh sucks, right?
Yes.
How do I then prove that the kueh doesn't suck? Right, Kaylin? Huh? Kaylin says...
That's the only way out is you let me try your kueh.
But you see, these kind of value judgments become very tricky, which is why a lot of people think that, hey, defamation, very easy, this kind of lawsuit is very easy to start. You say something that I don't like, right? I can sue you, but that's not true because a lot of times people say a lot of things that are a matter of value judgment, you see, right? Of course, if I say something that can be proven objectively to be untrue, for example, Regana, I go and publish tomorrow on my Facebook page that you are a convicted criminal. Right? Not saying you are.
I'm not, by the way.
Okay, yeah, right.
Know here today.
You can easily prove that you aren't one because there are no police records against you. You don't have a jail record. You don't have court records, right? Then that kind of statement, easy to prove or disprove, right? But if you go out and you make a value judgment, okay, this restaurant, the food is terrible. The staff is poorly trained. Hygiene standards are questionable. Then, that becomes a matter of a value statement, right? How do you prove whether or not the food is truly good or bad? You contrast that with a situation where I go and I publish something about a restaurant and I say, this restaurant got cockroach, right? This restaurant never obtained NEA certification before opening. You see how these become more solid statement of facts that can easily be proved or disproved. So how you say things and the way in which you couch your opinions also matter, right? Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we've covered criminal conduct because we spoke about that chap that did the backflip into the animal enclosure at the zoo. So that's trespassing and everything. The hot potato is POFMA. Before, I've got some questions coming through, but very quickly, POFMA, for our audience today, what is it all about?
I think one big misconception that I would say 80 to 90% of the population have about POFMA is that I can POFMA you, you can POFMA me. But that's not true. The POFMA can only be wielded by one person, the government.
Yes.
So the POFMA is there to correct untruths that may have severe repercussions for larger issues. Some of these larger issues may relate to public health, national security, diplomatic relationship, trust in the government, okay? So if you say something that causes widespread public alarm, like for example, if I go outside right now, stand on the street and I yell very loudly, ivermectin is effective to treat COVID, or I post something along those lines on my Facebook page, right? And I happen to have 1 million followers, then you're likely to get POFMA because this is something that may cause a public health crisis, right? Can you imagine everyone starting to take ivermectin, right? So the one misconception that people have is that I can POFMA you if I don't like what you say about me, or if what you say about me is untrue. You can't. Only the government can wield POFMA, and POFMA is wielded usually only in relation to statements that have, you know, widespread, severe national agenda kind of ramifications. If I don't like something you say about me, or I think that something you've said about me, Regana, is untrue, I cannot POFMA you. What I can do is I can go to court and I can take out a false statement application under the Harassment Act against you to have you either correct the statement or to have you remove the statement. Okay, so this false statement regime under the Harassment Act is something like a mini POFMA that can be wielded by one individual or one company against another individual or another company. Yeah?
Okay.
Okay.
Clear.
Clear or not?
Clear. Clear. Okay,
good.
so I have a question. No, not me. Our participants actually have 4. So these are open to both of you. Maybe I ask Peilin first. So what are some of the common legal disputes you have seen between influencers and companies in your lifetime?
Wow.
Which isn't that long a lifetime because Peilin very young.
She's very young. That's very true.
Thank you. I mean, honestly, because the work that I do, okay, so sometimes there's the questions of loading. Loading means if I create a video, so I'm using terms in industry that I mean, if you're not from the industry, then you learn something new today. If I create a video for you, right, for how long, and in the video, I promote your restaurant or your kueh, and I say, this kueh, very delicious. Please eat the kueh from Feng Wei Li shop. Then the question is, how long can Wei Li use my video for? Okay, and that is what loading usually means, right? So it means, okay, if in a typical contract, if it is well drafted, it will say that you are allowed to use it for loading of a year. And if in the following year, you would still like to use my delicious kueh video, then you will need to give me an extra top-up fee because you did not film the video from scratch again. So I should logically not have to pay you the full amount, but with maybe a 10-20% top-up to continue to use your video for the second year or the third year. And it's not, I mean, it's common in the marketing world that people take one advertisement and then for the next 10 years, you still see the same advertisement being used by the company promoting the drinks or the restaurant or whatever, right? So that is something that I think is possibly, we do see that come up sometimes because it wasn't discussed in the first place. And then companies will say, okay, come on, I paid her for it. It's my video and I should be able to use it forever. The second type sometimes is that the influencer may have done a review on his own accord, right? So for example, I put up a video to say your water is, the mask that you're selling is very good for my face. I've got very good skin after that. Now then, can the company use that video as a marketing tool, right? Because I didn't actually agree to be your ambassador. I actually only did the video on my own accord. You didn't pay me to do it. Are you allowed to take a screenshot of it and post it? Or if you see, especially the restaurants or the hawker stores we go to, they will paste, you know, a celebrity's photo there and say, look, they visited me, or they did a show about me, and therefore, you know, they use it to promote whatever they are selling. So these are more the very typical day by day, what you see regularly in terms of disputes. Of course, they are the bigger disputes type, and nowadays, like one of the our participant talked about the cancel culture. But you know, to be honest, as I said, this is very much an extension of what we used to see in the entertainment world. Okay, we have a celebrity, very well loved, very much used by a lot of brands as an ambassador, and then we found out that the celebrity is actually a drug user, right? And then suddenly everybody drops him like a hot potato, because there's a secret information being leaked out that that person is had an affair, for example, right? And everybody then said, oh, very wrong, very wrong. So let's drop him or her. I think it is standing on the side of many clients that I work with. Many of the clients, although they may be selling a product or a service, they have values that they stand for. And if they disagree strongly with the way some influencers are behaving, very much like celebrities, I think it is reasonable that they can no longer align their brand or their product and services with that influencer or celebrity. And often they will force that clause into the contract. That means it's a take it or leave it clause. You want to work with me, you want me to pay you money, then you have to be prepared that I must have a way out. You know, if you do something that is against the values of my brand, my product or services. So I'll let Wei speak about the legal side of this cancel culture. But I think it's not just about right or wrong, it's a bit of an inevitable. Yeah, and it's been happening all this time in the entertainment industry.
Really? You're doing a very good job speaking about the law. I'm very comfortable sitting here listening. Thanks for doing my work for me. Yeah, well, I think you covered very good points. Picking up from where Peilin left off about brands being able to drop influencers in situations where the influencers have embroiled themselves in some kind of controversy. The kind of clause is present when you work with larger brands, right? And we lawyers call that a morality clause. So a morality clause, if well drafted and drafted in the advantage or in the interests of the brand or the client, would say something like, well, if we find that you have embroiled yourself in any kind of scandal or controversy, and we find that, you know, your conduct or your reputation is no longer aligned with our brand values, very broad terms like that, then we have a right to terminate the engagement immediately, right, without having to pay you for the rest of the contract, for however long the contract might last. So it's all a matter of bargaining power. I think Peilin rightly pointed that out. If I were a nano influencer or a micro influencer, I probably can't tell the brand, hey, I don't want to remove this clause from your contract. The brand will ask me to go and fly kite, right? But if I were, let's say, a mega influencer with 1.5 million followers under my belt, not bought, organic, real, okay, then I may have a bit more of bargaining power, so to speak, to tell the brand, hey, I don't want this clause, Or if you really want the insight, let's, kind of tighten it to make it less ambiguous or make it less vague. Or let's state specifically the kinds of situations, right, in which you can exercise your right to terminate, right? So it's all about bargaining power. Yeah.
Okay.
The other kind of dispute that I see relates a lot to payment. You may say, wow, payment very straightforward. What to dispute about? I do my work, you pay me lah. But trust me, it's not, because people haggle, people want discounts, right? They'll say, hey, your video, I told you to produce a video that's like 45 seconds long. How come it's only 43 seconds and 30 minutes? I'm going to pay you less. Right? These kind of things happen, right?
Yes.
So I think I talked about this earlier. Payment terms, payment schedule, how much to pay, when to pay, is something that I think needs to be put into some kind of black and white at the very least, right? The other kind of dispute, again, I think Palian touched on this, relates to what we call image rights. A lot of influencers think that my image is my property, my face is my property, right? If you take a photo of me and you use it to promote your hair thinning product, or to promote your bak kut teh restaurant, you must pay me, you must ask me permission. But truth be told, that's not the case. If Regana, you take a photo of me, assuming I'm a major celebrity, not unbelievable because so handsome, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, imagine you take a photo of me, right? And then you put it up on your website and say, hey, wow, this influencer wear my jacket, wow, my brand. Technically, okay, if I allowed you to take that photo, right? Even if I didn't allow you to, you own the rights to that photo. Because under copyright law, whoever takes a photo owns the right to the photo. Okay, it doesn't matter that the photo features me or that my face is inside. I technically, as the person in the photo, have no right to come to you and say, stop using that photo.
Oh.
So this is something that alarms, surprises, and upsets a lot of influencers. Because they think, and rightly so, right? I mean, you have to understand and empathize with them, right? Hey, my face is what I make money off, How can you anyhow take my face and then plonk it, outside your shop or on your Instagram page and associate your product with me without me knowing or without me, allowing you to do so? So some jurisdictions elsewhere in the world, other countries, they have developed this concept of an image right. I own the right to my image. If you use my image, you must pay me. But here in Singapore, the law hasn't progressed to that extent yet. So if you take a photo of me, I technically have no right to stop you from posting it. Yeah.
Okay, so next time I know lah. Okay, Ken. So I will take one more question. This was specifically to Wei Li, actually. We have some participants who are really listening in. You mentioned that if we want to use someone else's property, we have to get permission, which is true, or acknowledge or credit them. Is it enough to say I take a photo from online, from a website of a very nice plate of kueh, and I just put via this link, like via Fong Wei Li's Kueh Shop, and use that photo in my YouTube video? Is that okay or not?
Is it enough? Technically speaking, it's not. The only way to protect your own backside, right, when you use somebody else's content, pardon the crudeness, okay, is to get permission. Okay? Once you get permission, whoever owns it can't turn around and say, hey, why are you using it? Then your obvious retort to this person would be, you let me use what? Right? Okay? So crediting, assuming you don't get permission because you don't know who it belongs to, right? Or you're lazy, you just credit. Crediting is not 100% block or shield against an infringement lawsuit. Okay, crediting is like a halfway house approach somewhat. It tells the world that I'm not trying to pass off this video or this music or this photo as my own. I'm telling you I got it from somewhere. But at the end of the day, if whoever originated that video, that piece of music, that photograph, still wants to come to you and say, hey, Regana, can you take it down? I never gave you permission to use it. I don't care whether or not you credited me. I just don't want you to be using my stuff. You have to take it down.
Yeah.
If you don't, you are still at risk for attracting an infringement lawsuit or action. right? But I think sometimes we also need to temper that kind of risk with practicalities. Like I said, if I'm not somebody who's famous and I use somebody's photo and I credit that person, it's unlikely that person is going to come after me, right?
No, I think actually, practically speaking, it depends whether you're going to give a good review or a bad review of the kueh.
That's true, yeah.
That is true.
Yeah.
Because if I'm going to put it up and I'm going to say these kuehs are the best kuehs I've ever had in my life, right? And please, everybody go and buy this kueh. I don't think Feng Wei Li's kueh shop is going to be too upset that I use their photos. They will say, wow, thank you so much.
Yeah. But if you use it and you kind of disparage the product, then of course the person is going to come after you. That person may not
don't use their photos, take your own photos.
Yeah, when you buy the kueh, you just take a photo.
You even buy my kueh before you comment about it. You're not even giving me any business before you comment about my kueh. Then I will come after you, right? But at least gave me a bit of business by taking the photo yourself and then commenting saying it's not nice, too salty, too sticky. Then so be it. I may leave you alone, right? Yeah. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes.
So everything is a halfway house approach. It's not fail safe, right? Fail safe. Get permission, but sometimes we make do with what we can, we have and what we can access.
It's always safe to cover yourself. So I'm just going to ask this question very quickly because it was an add-on to dropping celebrities. This is both of you. Interesting question from a very interesting participant. Are organizations able to sue damages if the influencer's conduct was egregious enough to cause significant damage to the brand? Right? They're asking for examples, maybe not, but can like a makeup brand, right? Can they sue a social media influencer for really causing damage to their brand because of what he or she has done?
So it's a case where you say, for example, the makeup company stops the contract, doesn't pay the influencer remaining fees, might want to claw back what was originally paid to her, and on top of all these, say that I've suffered damages of sales of my product, and I can actually find a way to measure them. They amount to $3 million, and they actually claim this $3 million from the influencer. I'm just rephrasing the question so that Wei Li can answer it because he's the lawyer.
I thought you were going to take it. I think. What do you think? I think from a legal point of view, it's tricky. Of course, there's an indemnity clause in the contract, which the influencer stupidly signed. So what's an indemnity clause? An indemnity clause is basically a clause that says that, look, if by your action, okay, I'm the brand, you're the influencer, if by your action, any kind of action, okay, you cause my brand to suffer monetary loss or suffer a loss in reputation, you must indemnify me for that loss, okay? And you have to pay me whatever losses I've suffered. Now, if you have that kind of clause in your engagement contract, I would say, yes, you may be able as a brand to sue under that kind of clause. But notwithstanding the fact that there is that clause, you may sue under it. You, as the person suing, will run into a practical hurdle. It's an evidential hurdle. How are you going to convince the court that whatever you have lost in terms of sales, in terms of revenue, is directly attributable to the influencer's conduct? Because how much you make in a particular manner, be it whether or not you provide a service or a product, fluctuates, right? That's the nature of doing business, right? I can make less in a month because of COVID, because my food really sucks, right? Because I haven't been spending enough on A&P as opposed to past months. So many moving parts come together to influence revenue, profits, right? So if you want to sue an influencer and say, hey, you caused me this amount of loss because you go and use the F word in public, people don't like you now, right? Then you have to, as the plaintiff or the claimant in that lawsuit, prove conclusively that whatever you lost is caused directly by the influencer's conduct. And that's often very, very difficult to prove. In legal parlance, we call that proving special damages, and special damages are notoriously hard to prove. Yeah.
Okay. Which this is a good segue actually to our case scenario about contracts and brands. So let's look at the first story that we are putting up. This is just a very summary actually for our attendees today about Jen Chua, or her handle, they call it Jen Knows Best. So a young influencer, 30,000 followers on Instagram, TikTok, not combined, I'm just saying, famous for her tutorial for beauty. Okay, I think there's a lot of them out there. Now, in 2016, around there, or 2010, that might be slightly a mistake there. Jen signed a 5-year contract. Okay, so let's put it in context. Actually, it was supposed to be 2020. So she signed a 5-year contract. So means a contract would end in 2025 lah. Okay, then with a Korean brand. Then in 2021, she was approached by an even more famous cosmetic European brand and offered a contract of a lifetime. So she decides, I'm done now with the Korean brand. They cannot pay me as much as the European brand. And she really wants to sign on with the company. So obviously the Korean company, as we were talking about just now, about companies suing and all, they insisted that Jen has to compensate them back about 3 years of the contract, and she's not allowed to sign, or an NDA not allowed to sign for a cosmetic company for 2 years. Quite strict the contract. So she decided that, to stop working with the Korean company, and she didn't think much about it. So she stopped working, and then she went to sign on with the European one. Then of course, the Korean company comes and sues her. Okay, and also they are continuing to use her images, like you say, right, Pelin loading her images for their socials and using her for their marketing campaigns. So on the surface, it seems clear that the brand contracted Jen to promote their products. So now she wants to break it. Okay, so what are some of the key contractual clauses Jen should have looked out for when signing her contract with the Korean brand? So I will open it to both Pelin and Wei Li to answer this. What are the things that she should have picked out, for example?
Pelin, you go first.
He doesn't want to.
No, not that I don't want to talk, but from a talent management point of view, right? If you're advising a talent, right, going into a contract with a major brand, what would you tell the talent to actually, pay attention to?
Okay, I will let Wei Li handle the legal part of it.
Can.
Which is really about contractually, can she break a contract in the first year of a 5-year contract, right? Can the Korean company insist that she doesn't work with any other brand? And the part about the Korean company using her videos and photos despite her giving notice that she stopped working with them. So the legal parts, I will let Wei Li respond. But I will address something that I would call honor. Okay. As if Jen wants to be an influencer, I would ask her primarily that if you want to be an influencer and you want to be in the marketplace, you need to think about what other brands for the next 10 years are going to think of you. And if you are someone who is going to forsake a supporter who has signed a proper contract with you to engage you, because subsequently you're going to be slightly more famous and someone else is going to come and offer you more money, then you're not, in my personal opinion, you're not an honorable person. And if I'm going to feel this way, so will your supporters and fans, your followers. Who are they likely to side with if they hear this situation, right? So people generally want to see or want to support others who are loyal, who know that they should be thankful to whoever was supporting them when they were first starting out. And if that's the reputation of what you want for yourself, how you want to be seen and portrayed, then in my opinion, you are doing yourself a bigger disservice than the Korean company or the European company.
Okay.
So I think it's beyond, like I said, I'll leave Wei Li to respond to the legal parts, but in a situation like that, I would tell the influencer, I don't care about the law. I care about what I call public opinion. right? So it's not about what the court of law is going to say, but the court of public opinion is going to judge you, and they will judge you as someone who is in Chinese we call it 忘恩负义, right? Which means you forgot who showed you a favor back then, and now you are bigger and more famous. You are going for a bigger brand. I would say people despise such actions, and you will lose in the court of public opinion. So it doesn't matter what the law is going to say about you.
Okay, so before Wei-Li, we go on to you, I just want to make it known to our attendees today that Jen Chua, or Jen Knows Best, is a fake person. Just in case you're going to start looking for her on Instagram and TikTok, she doesn't exist. So Wei-Li, how about you? What are your thoughts about the first thing I asked about the contractual clause that you look out for?
I think there's a water on the bridge, right? Now that she's only looking at the contractual clauses
Yeah.
for 2 years into the engagement. But I think if I were an influencer, and if assuming I don't have the benefit or the support of a larger talent management, expert or company to help me vet my contracts or to help me look at my contracts, I think the things you may want to pay attention to in a contract, if you receive one, will be things like like I said, right? When are people supposed to pay you? What must you deliver, right? The exact scope of your work product. You may want to look at termination clauses. Termination clauses are essentially clauses that tell you when you can terminate, who can terminate, and when you can terminate, and are there any penalties for terminating or not. And you'll be surprised, some contracts are quite unfairly drafted. You can have contracts that say, I'm the brand, I can drop you like a hot potato anytime, but you as the influencer, you can never drop me until the entire 2 or 3 years term of the contract finishes. Okay? Or you can have lopsided kind of contracts that say, well, both of us can drop each other lah. For me to drop you, the influencer, I can drop you by giving you 1 week's notice. Meaning I tell you today, I don't want to work with you anymore. 1 week later, bye-bye, see you, so sad, right? But if you are the influencer and you want to stop working with me, you must give me 5 months notice. Right? Meaning I tell you today that I don't want to work with you anymore. For the next 5 months, I must still deliver. I must still make videos for you. So you got to be mindful, right, about whether or not these clauses exist. And even if they do, whether or not, they are equal, so to speak. You cannot sign a contract with a lopsided or an unequal clause. 10 years down the road, okay, maybe don't say 10, 6 months down the road or 1 year down the road, you decide, hey, I want to quit. I don't like this brand. I don't want to work for them anymore. You look at the clause and you say, hey, why is it so unfair? You can tell me today that you don't want to work with me, tomorrow we end, but if I don't want to work with you, I need to give you 5 months notice. You can't go to a court and say, Your Honor, it's not fair. I didn't see this, I didn't realize this. The court will tell you too bad, so said you signed it, right? You can't wiggle out of a contract by saying things that I didn't understand, or it's unfair. Too bad lah, unfair. You should have recognized that it was unfair in the first place, and you should have bargained, right? If you really don't like it, you had a right to walk out. Okay, you accepted it. So I think in particular to this Jen right, I would say she ought to have looked at the termination clause to see what the conditions for termination are. Some contracts will tell you you can terminate, but on termination, you must pay me a fee.
Yeah.
Okay? Are you willing or prepared to then pay the fee? I mean, it's another question for another day whether or not this fee known as a penalty fee will be enforceable in court. If you want to find out about that, you sign up for law school, right? But let's put that discussion aside, right? Early termination always comes with a fee. Right? You go sign for a gym membership, also the same thing, right? They tell you, oh, this gym membership is for 2 years. If you want to terminate after 1 year, you must pay a termination fee. Mobile phone, same thing, right? Your mobile plan, termination fee. So a lot of these contracts have what we call termination penalties, and these kind of influencer contracts, they are no exception. You will find them, right? So he might have done her well to take note of these things right at the beginning.
Yeah. So let's say now she's broken up the contract, she has terminated it. The Korean company can still come after her, right?
I mean, they can come after and say, look, It depends on what they can come after her for, right? If there's a termination fee for early termination and she doesn't pay, then I think the straightforward thing that they can come after her for is for the termination fee. Even if there is no termination fee stated and she kind of ends the contract early, the Korean company can say, hey, you know, I've put certain investments into you. Because of you, and because of the fact that you are going to produce videos for us for the next 5 years, we have engaged an in-house Marcom expert, right, to post these videos, to circulate these videos, right, and to disseminate these videos among our fan base, okay? And I've engaged this Marcom expert on a contract for the next 5 years, you know. So now you tell me you don't want to produce videos anymore for me. What am I going to do with my in-house Marcom expert? Am I supposed to sack this person? Right? So if the brand has incurred, you know, certain sunk costs or investment costs to kind of make the working relationship between the brand and the influencer work out, then I can go after the influencer for these kind of costs that I put in. Effectively, I would have wasted the cost, right? If you drop me halfway, right? So there are many ways to kind of skin this cat, depending on the different moving parts that have gone into this influencer brand relationship. Yeah. So no straightforward answer.
Okay. As a lawyer speaks. So even if the contract is terminated, right, Pelin and Willie, the Korean company can still have the right to continue using her videos on their YouTube and their her promotional marketing materials for them, even though it's already, let's say, she terminated and stuff. Can they still use it, or they can use it because it was in the contract that she didn't read?
Aileen, what are your views from the loading perspective?
I think it really depends on what was in the contract, you know. And like I said, this is quite a common clause nowadays. It will be quite upfront as to how long they are able to use the images or the videos, and usually it will be structured in such a way that they will even say, even if this contract is terminated, you know, I will be able to use it for the next 5 years. So of course we try to be as clear as possible because we don't want any disputes, especially upon termination. But like I said, I think it will be more than what the court of law says. It will also be about what the court of public opinion says about the influencer and also about the company. So if the company is my client, for example, I will advise them, do you really want to look like you are bullying an influencer? You know, and what would your customers think of you, right? As a brand, why are you bullying an influencer? You know, if it's really a case of, I mean, you can say, but the contract allows me to be a big bully. But that's how you're going to be portrayed, a big bully. Why do you want to do that? So in the work I do, I often, you know, people often feel very strongly about, it's my right, it's my legal right, it's in the contract, it's in the law, you know, I would get it if I go to a court. Yeah, but if you win in the court of law and you make a total loss in the court of public opinion, then it goes against the whole point of wanting to do marketing with an influencer, or it goes against the whole point of being an influencer, because you no longer will be an influencer if you no longer have followers who will listen to what you say.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think there's more than meets the eye when you talk about these kind of brand influencer relationships. There are a lot of undercurrents, there are a lot of layers, right? And it's not an area where we as lawyers can readily step in and say, Sula, contract ma. I mean, for a very vanilla kind of business dealing, let's say supplier, vendor, or you know, a service provider, customer, I will say, yeah, right. If you have a dispute and you can't sort it out, then you threaten to sue. But if you are in this area where you are constantly under public scrutiny, judge you for every single little thing you do, every little movement you make, then it might not make sense to, as a knee-jerk reaction, say, I want to sue, I want to sue, I want to sue. Right? And the ironic thing about resorting to legal action as an influencer is that the legal action in and of itself becomes a matter of public sensation, right? And you never know how legal actions are going to work out for you. You can have the best case, you can have the best lawyer, but if at the end of the day you go to court and you blunder as a witness, right, or you get a judge who's unsympathetic, you might not have things go your way, and that could turn into a PR nightmare, right? So we've got to be a bit careful. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. I didn't realize we have been speaking for so long, so we only got 20 minutes, but I do want to look at the next case scenarios. But just a quick reminder to everybody not to forget to download the handouts, and the link will also be sent to you in an email tomorrow. So if you can quickly look at the next case scenario, because social media influencers are in constant spotlight, right? So cat fights are not only in the alley lah. So they're now also online. So very quickly here, we have two ladies who are having a cat fight because one, the mouthpiece as an IG handle is called, she wants to change her social media strategy. She wants to take the good girl outlook, and so she posted a couple of things on her Twitter, and she posted it out there for all her fans and her followers. Then the goddess, or the controversial influencer, Loudmouth, decided to call her out, okay, and called her all sorts of things, right? As you can see, a liar, a fake, even said that it was pathetic that she's living this type of lifestyle and stuff. So the battle went on for months, and it got to a point where the goddess has actually asked her followers to spam the accounts of Mouthpiece, to post things that were not true. And the Mouthpiece decided that she had enough of this, sued the goddess for harassment and online bullying. She also sued the online platform, okay, for not stopping the goddess from posting. So, Wei, because I need to go with you for the first question. Does the Mouthpiece have a case against the goddess?
Well, I think we did cover these tangentially, I think, earlier in our discussions, right? It depends on what was actually said, right? So if you go around calling people hypocrite, liar, fake, still fat after living a healthy lifestyle, I mean, let's just look at the things that
This is all fake, by the way, just to put it out there that these ladies do not exist, only in my head.
Liar, fake, hypocrite, a bit hard to prove one way or another, right?
But what if they're posting? It's black and white, right?
Yeah, but you see, my point is, if I were the Mouthpiece, I'm going to find it a little hard to kind of say that with. I mean, it all depends on what the Mouthpiece wants to go after the. I'm very confused by the names here. It depends on what the Mouthpiece wants to go after the goddess for, right? I mean, I could essentially take out a harassment action against the goddess and say, look, what you're saying me has caused me a lot of harassment. I feel very upset, I feel very, distressed after reading all these insults, right? But you see, right, the thing about being an influencer is that it's not easy for you to go and claim that, wow, somebody has said something about me, and as a result, I'm very distressed. Because the natural reaction that people will have is that if you're an influencer and you want to put yourself out there in the spotlight, you shouldn't be so fragile, right? I mean, you have to take the good and bad of publicity, You cannot put yourself out there on a spotlight and expect the world only to shower and lavish you with positive comments. It's a bit tough to say that, I'm distressed by these kind of things. Now, still fat after living a healthy lifestyle, that depends, right? I mean, if I'm fat, okay, let's not get into that. That's fat shaming.
No.
Right?
But then, okay, so I'm going to stop you there. Can she, the Mouthpiece, sue goddess's followers for spamming her account?
Well, tough, unless you also go along the lines of saying that these followers, by leaving these comments, by circulating or reposting these nasty opinion about me, you've caused me a lot of hurt, a lot of distress, a lot of harassment. Yes. But like I said, harassment is a very subjective thing. What harasses you may not harass me, right? You see where I'm coming from? Because different people have different thresholds for what constitutes harassment, right? And I think the law rightly acknowledges that. And I think there's some unspoken expectation that if you are going to be an influencer, i.e. you are going to make a living out of being a public figure, then you got to be a little bit more thick-skinned. Yeah. So there is, I mean, the law doesn't say black and white that influencers must be thick-skinned. No such thing. Right? There is an implicit understanding, right, or acceptance that you if you are putting yourself out there in the spotlight, you shouldn't be able to nilly-willy come and say, hey, I'm harassed by what you say. Okay. So I think it might be a little tricky for the mouthpiece to take out legal action against the goddess. You can sue, but whether or not you will win, whether or not you will succeed is another thing altogether. Yeah.
Okay. So looking at this from a PR perspective, Peilin, I mean, it's really a fight online. It's messy. So what would your advice be for these two ladies? Let's shut up and move on.
Yeah, definitely. If any of them are my friends, that's exactly what I was saying. But so usually if they say they want to solve it legally, I will say, please speak to your lawyer, because I am not your lawyer and I cannot be one. But I would say, when we use the term keyboard warrior, we often think of only the bad ones, i.e. they are the people who are harassing you and spamming you. You forget that you are also an influencer, i.e. even Regana, you have 400 supporters or followers, right? That's 400 people. Now imagine if there's 20 bad spamming messages or comments that are saying you are fat, you are drinking from the bottle, and despite what you say, your food tastes horrible. If to every one of these messages, there are 200 people that actually reply and say, that's not true, you keep quiet, you go away, you don't disturb my Regana because she's the love of my life, there's no way her food tastes bad, or she may be fat, but you look even worse, right? I mean, in other words, you can activate your own supporters and followers to support you. And that's a lot more powerful for anyone who is reading these bad comments than, you watch out, my lawyer is going to send you a letter of demand, right? Because it is using the power of other people's opinions to support and protect you, right? And therefore, it becomes third-party endorsement. There are third-party advocates out there that are defending you. And again, I keep bringing it back to very much the entertainment industry, because that's how it works. There's a celebrity, people are saying bad things about the celebrity. What happens? The fan club, the fans of the celebrity, they step up. They see it as their duty and their jobs to go and defend their favorite actor or singer or actress. And there's no need to resort to only legal outcomes or strategies to stop people from doing that.
Actually, really, they can also go for mediation, right? If their counsel said and said, hey, take it offline.
I mean, you
for mediation.
Yes, but I think in reality, most of the time for mediation to even start, you need to file some sort of lawsuit first. Very few people will agree to go and mediate without some sort of lawsuit being filed. And I think that the nature, again, of this industry, it's very peculiar. What I'm going to say next, a lot of lawyers are going to hate me for it, right? But sometimes you got to ask yourself, is legal action the best course of action to take? There's this thing called the Streisand effect. I'm not sure whether or not you've heard of it. The Streisand effect refers to a situation where the more you try to conceal something, the more it, spreads and the more it goes viral. So let's take Mouthpiece and Goddess, right? Okay, so assuming Mouthpiece is unhappy, she goes to her lawyer, and her lawyer, being trigger happy and wanting to earn her money, says, okay, I'm going to fire a cease and desist letter. Let's send a demand letter to Mouthpiece, to Goddess, right? Now, what do people do with letters of demand in this day? They don't throw. If they receive a letter of demand, they're going to post it, right? So the Goddess might put it on her TikTok or her Instagram and say, wow, these Mouthpiece want to bully me, hire this big shot lawyer. Look at how fiercely worded this letter is. All I did was to make some comments about her, which I think are true. Now she wants to bully, she wants to oppress me. And if I'm a reader or if I'm a netizen, I never knew of what Goddess said about Mouthpiece. Now that this thing comes to light, I'll be like, hey, why is it? I very kepo leh. What led to this? Isn't it a situation where the mouthpiece now is worse off because people who initially didn't even know about these negative comments will now all become kepo and try to find out what these negative comments are. I mean, look, if at the end of the day, the mouthpiece's agenda is to get attention, regardless of what kind of attention, good attention, bad attention, I don't care, I just want attention, then I'll say, yes, she has succeeded, right? But if she doesn't want people to see these comments that the goddess has made about her, she's truly unhappy about them, then she needs to think twice as to whether or not going to a lawyer and sending a demand letter might be the best thing, right? I mean, we don't need to look further than the past few weeks to see examples of lawyers' letters being splashed in the public domain, right? So I shan't say more, but it's a real living problem that I think lawyers need to be very cognizant about. Yeah, that's why I say lawyers will hate me after I say this.
It's okay. Come, we've got about 6-7 minutes left, but I've got to take some questions very quickly before we round up. So I have a question here. Assuming a blogger is rewriting and posting, not outright copying and pasting, okay? So obviously they take it, they do edits and everything, and the content taken from another, and it's very obvious that the content structure or the ideas used are sort of the same. I don't know if you know recently of the Master Chef in the UK, she sort of plagiarized recipes from a Singaporean local cookbook writer. This is not the same thing, but I think it's almost the same. Is it a copyright infringement if no permission or credit is given? Really? I would think so, right? Like you say, like, unless someone finds out.
Tricky. It's a matter of degree. You see, a lot of people think of copyright in terms of black and white. It's either infringement or not. But the truth of the matter is that if a court has to decide whether or not there's been infringement, it's often a matter of degree, right? It's not disparate on the one side, infringe, on the other side, no, it never infringe. It's sort of like a sliding scale. So the court will look at a number of things, right? How similar, whether or not the ideas flow in that exact same manner, whether or not, let's say you're trying to plagiarize a recipe, whether or not the steps are in that same chronology, same manner, same order, but just, reworded. There are many, many things the court will look at. So I don't think there's a very clear-cut answer as to whether or not something is infringing or something isn't. Yeah. So I understand that the question is, well, if I take something and I adapt it a little, is that considered infringement? I think if you want a very succinct answer from me, it really depends on how much you have adapted it. If you just take a tweak a little bit, right, but people can see the similarities, right, then you kena lah, right? But if you take it, the broad idea is there, but you repackage it, you change the color, you change the character names, you really revise it to the extent that, it's largely different, then you may get away with it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Eli. I have one question actually for Pei Lin. So someone is saying that, let's say, if he or she wrote a blog about a product, okay, a review on his or her blog about product A, let's say shampoo A, and in his or her opinion, she preferred shampoo B because it's better, because it's has more lashes. Will he or she get into trouble if shampoo A was unhappy with what he or she said? Can he or she get into trouble?
I think the quick answer is no.
No, right? Yeah.
But the legal answer would be is saying that the product is inferior to brand B, defamatory. Yes, it's defamatory, but you probably can justify it with a defense. But again, these are all legal issues. I'll leave it to Willie.
Willie, how? So if I said, right, okay, so I use both of you as example. I tried your kueh, Willie, and I've tried Pei Lin's kueh. I really like Pei Lin's, and I said, no, I didn't like yours.
It's fair comment lah.
Can I get into trouble?
No, you can't lah. It's fair comment. I mean, very, very unlikely you'll get into trouble lah. Unless, of course, you make slanderous remarks about my kueh lah and say that, kueh has been made. This kueh, the ingredients have been.
Oh, there you go.
Nice.
Oh, I'm hungry now.
Ingredients have been procured using money that was laundered or whatever it is, that I own a sweatshop and I employ children under the age of 10 in my kueh factory. Then, of course, those kind of things I can come after you for lah. But if you say this kueh not nice, then, I mean, you will not get into trouble for that. Because will get into trouble for that, then a lot of people who leave reviews on Google reviews or whatnot will be indeed like trouble.
Okay. So we really need to round off because I'm conscious of the time. So let's do some key takeaways from both of you. Okay. So as we all know, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Okay. Social media influencers. In the recent times, so much of stories have hit the public. Okay, I'm going to name names, right? Because I think it's in public. Sylvia Chan, Dee Kosh, Aloysius Ng, Royce Lee, and the list it's a short, long list lah. Okay, have come under fire for a variety of reasons. So Peilin, just one key takeaway from today for our listeners out there. One key takeaway that what they should not do or what they should consider when they're social media influencers and not get into trouble like these people.
Okay.
Advice, yeah.
I would say if I have to give one key takeaway, it will be what I have repeated throughout the webinar, that at the end of the day, you should not be only focused on what would be upheld in a court of law, but consider the fact that you are now playing in the public space. If you want to be an influencer, you are really becoming what we call public figure, and therefore it is about public opinion that would count, and so do not be so hung up as to what rights you have or what should or should not be done, but really consider what generally people will feel and how people will see actions. Nobody likes to find out that another person is fat shaming someone or name calling or being, a horrible friend, daughter, or boss. And therefore, it is logical that people would jump to the defense of what looks like a victim in their eyes. And therefore, don't be in such a hurry to find excuses and reasons for why you did certain things, but consider how your followers and your fans and your supporters and the brands that pay you would react to such news. Yeah.
Okay, that is really great takeaway, Peilin. Okay, Wei Li, come. From a legal perspective, one key takeaway. It's quite tough for a lawyer to think about one.
Because I agree with Peilin, that in this industry and really on this playing field, we cannot be too legalistic about things. We can't be too trigger happy. But I would say pay your taxes. If you are an influencer who's receiving endorsements and receiving, for example, freebies, you do know that these things are taxable. Even if you get, let's say, a sample, or let's say somebody sponsors your home renovation, these things are taxable. So please don't evade taxes. Declare honestly. Second, if you're making this your career and you are truly seriously making money out of it, then I would say, I think I said this earlier, you may not necessarily need to get a lawyer to draft a contract for you, but at least important terms or important things that are agreed upon, just put them somewhere like in an email or in a WhatsApp message so that there is no confusion as to who needs to pay who how much or who needs to deliver what by when, right? Yeah. So I guess that's what I want to say as a wrap up.
So pay your taxes as a social media influencer. But I think for social media influencers, always constantly remember you're in the spotlight. What you say, what you eat, what you breathe, what you wear, it's constant. Everyone's watching you. So be very mindful about what you act. And I think like what Peilin said, you could be a boss, a mother, a sister to anybody. So just really watch yourselves lah. It's a different time now, and everyone can just whip out a mobile phone and take a picture and share. So with that, we really have to bring this webinar to a close. I mean, we had some really, really good questions. So we really like to thank Peilin and Weili for sharing your time today. And I know it's a Friday night and your expertise with us. So very quickly, there are still many other webinars available for you to participate for free. So do scan the QR code that you are seeing right now on your screen, or visit www.cdc.gov.sg/Law Awareness Weeks to register for the other webinars. The next webinar that's coming up will be called Becoming a Family Together, but Not Together. I hope I said that correctly, which is happening on the 26th of October at 7 p.m. So after this webinar ends, please fill up the feedback form that will be shown in your browser for your completion. We really appreciate if you could take a couple of minutes to just fill up and let us know what more we can do, what other webinars we can organize for you. So now with that, once again, thank you very much for spending your Friday with us. Thank you very much, Pei-Ling and Weili. I know it's Friday again, for taking time off from work. And with that, I'm Regana. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Stay safe and have an awesome week ahead. Thank you.